Hello and welcome to tonight's Truth Proof live stream. I'm Les from Digital Creations, bringing you the Truth Proof live stream for this Friday night on this occasion. Following this week, I think we'll be back to the regular Thursdays. So yes, because we've got a great guest on tonight. We've accommodated our guest has accommodated us, and we're really thrilled for tonight's show. First of all, I am going to see who's in tonight's chat, who's come on tonight's chat. I can see there's a few of you in there. Let's just see if I can pick some names out. First of all, I've got to say welcome to Sky Flower, who's doing our moderating tonight. Evening, Sky. And I know you'll do a good job, as always. Right, we've got Ralph Winter in the chat. We've got Tino, Janice Parry, Diane Farrell, Stargazer Eternal, Johnny Appleseed, and Panoples, Corey, the disabled Welshman. I don't know if he is really disabled, but welcome to the show. And Tom Waters, Lorraine Groves, and did I mention you, Alison? Alison is on. Alison is moderating as well, it looks like. We had a little bit of issue there earlier, Paul, because we couldn't get Alison moderating. So it looks like Alison's in the moderating team tonight as well. So everybody welcome Alison. Okay, without too much of my prattle, as it were, we're going to get on with tonight's show. First of all, we will just play our little intro. So here we go, the Truth Proof live stream for tonight. Without further ado, I'm going to welcome Paul and his guest. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you very much, Les. Shame it's not a Thursday night, but we're thrilled to be speaking to Trey Hudson tonight. And it's took a bit of organising. We've been going to speak and then not managing it for last, I don't know, probably going on a year. Trey, if nobody's aware of his work and his research, he's a writer and researcher, primarily the Meadow Project, which is going to cover with us tonight and tell us about some of the sightings, some of the experiences connected to that, but also other research within the field of unexplained phenomena, because he's not just come to it and joined the Meadow Project. So Trey, welcome to Truth Proof.
Well, thank you for having me. I know it's been, a little bit of a logistical back and forth, but I am just tickled pink to be here. And thank you for having me. And I hope this is just going to be a really illuminating and interesting show tonight.
I'm sure it will be. We got a great bunch of people in chat. And as I always say to them, let's have some questions for Trey based on what he's looking into, in capital letters, please. And Les will fire them out to us at some point, 45 minutes, an hour into the stream. So let's start a little bit before the Meadow Project, Trey. What got you interested in the unexplained?
Oh, that's a really good question. I was a child of the 70s, and here in the States, and I'm sure, elsewhere, is you really started to see a blossoming of paranormal TV shows and documentaries and things like that. There were several things that happened in the 70s. One of them is right over my shoulder here. There was a really cool movie called Sasquatch, The Legend of Bigfoot, which was a pseudo documentary that was filmed, in Canada and in the United States. And I saw it when I was 12 years old. And, a 12-year-old boy and Bigfoot in the woods and horses and adventurers and all of that. I mean, what's not to love? It was just, it was almost like, crack cocaine for my developing mind. I just love this stuff. And there was a television show that came out in the 70s called In Search Of, which is a kind of a benchmark now for, televised documentaries in the paranormal and high strangeness. Leonard Nimoy would come on, every week and talk about everything from Bigfoot, the UFOs, the missing persons, spontaneous human combustion, just the Bermuda Triangle, all of this stuff. And then, of course, you had follow-on books that would come, during this time. And just to show you what let me back up. There was also a TV show on the CBS network here in the States called Project UFO, which was kind of a very loose dramatization of the Project Blue Book files. And I'm such a geek, and I'll admit it, that I have both of those series complete on DVD. So, I mean, I know that's really kind of pathetic, but, that's just kind of the way it is. So, I was like a little maladaptive sponge in my formative years, just trying to soak all this stuff up. And a kind of a funny story is my fifth year class went to Washington, D.C. on a field trip, and all the other kids, we went by bus, and the parents were buying their kids things to read on the bus. And, they were getting football magazines or rock and roll magazines. And I said, no, I want a UFO magazine. So, that kind of shows you how I am. So, I came across this, I think, honestly, so I was always inquisitive. And during this time, my father traveled all throughout the United States doing contractor work. And one evening in the 70s, while he was, traveling from point A to point B, he heard a radio show. And on this radio show, there was an author talking about his new book. And the author was a gentleman by the name of Brad Steiger, the very famous, researcher and author. And the book he was talking about was called Gods of Aquarius. And my dad bought a copy of this book and had it there at my household. And, like I said, just being so inquisitive, I read this book and was just amazed at, the information contained. And the cool thing about this particular book, and it's seems like it's a new concept now, but it really isn't, is what Brad Steiger talked about, very similar to John Keel, is he didn't limit it to just one phenomenon. The book talks about, UFOs and Bigfoot. Like here's a picture of a Bigfoot in a UFO book. That's crazy. There's pictures of it and things about ghosts, and there's some flying discs. So all of this stuff was looked at through the investigative lens of Brad Steiger. So I just thought that was really the way to approach some of this stuff and not pigeonhole it, but to look at it in a very broad sense. So that's kind of what got me interested in this. And I, went on to a university that has a parapsychology department, University of West Georgia, studied under Dr. William Roll, the famous parapsychologist. So I guess you can say this this type of interest is tightly and intricately woven into my psychological DNA.
So I want to ask you something else, but I'll just touch on Brad Steiger while it's still so kind of fresh in my mind. What did ufologists and researchers of the day think of Brad Steiger and his take on the subject? Were there any feedback?
As far as I know, and I was, like I said, young at that time, so and we didn't have the internet, so I wasn't reading the reviews of Brad Steiger's reviews of his book or his research. But it seemed like they were maybe a little bit more open to that. It was kind of brand new, and you had a lot of very, very young and brand new UFO organizations popping up left and right. And I don't think people were quite as entrenched as maybe they are now. Now, thankfully, I think some people are having their eyes open, but still I run into the roadblocks, when I lecture. But you remember John Keel was also very popular back then, and probably his most well-known book, at least here in the 21st century, is, of course, the Mothman Prophecies. And he talks once again about all of this stuff. He also talks about it all in this haunted earth. So, I think people, since the whole, researching this kind of stuff was kind of newish in the 1970s, I think people had maybe a much more open mind because they didn't really have a feel for what was going on. And then as it evolved into the 80s and the 90s, people were like, no, we know exactly what's going on. They're metal craft that are physical, flying from Zeta Reticuli to Earth or whatever. And people invested so much emotional capital in that that thought process and that belief.
They couldn't move.
Yeah, they can't.
They couldn't move out of that box that pigeonholed themselves in,
right.
Could they?
Yeah.
So do you think then? I personally do, and I'm saying this question, I think I already know the answer, that it is coming full circle now, because there's more and more people within the subject actually considering the fact that it's multi-phenomena, everything's linked. And I know you're on that page, I think. I'm right in saying.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of funny you should mention that. One of the things I talk about in my book is, and I talk about how I kind of got into this, is I was at a UFO conference. I was invited by one of the speakers, and I was, I had a T-shirt on that said something, paranormal research or something like that. So I was like, the proverbial, feces in the punch bowl. I was a ghost guy at a Bigfoot conference, and I, kept kind of getting the stink eye, from, these Sasquatch researchers. And I'm like, okay, it's fine. And I'm just here enjoying the subject matter because I'm also interested in that. And the amazing thing happened is during breaks, these various researchers, they would kind of, scan around and, kind of sneak up to me and say, hey, I don't want anybody to see me talking to you, but I've had some other weird stuff happen when I was researching. And one of my best research partners right now, which is Bob Grumpy Wilson, who's been in several cryptid shows here in the U.S. He came up to me, and he was very candid about it. He goes, I want to know what you know, because I have seen things and experienced things I cannot explain that fit into the realm of paranormal. And I thought, well, what a delightful, as Hannibal Lecter said, quid pro quo, Clarice. It was a wonderful time for me to get to know a little bit more about cryptid research, because that was an area, quite frankly, I was weak in. So back then, people, like you said, were a little bit more entrenched. I think now the evidence is there. I mean, the data is there, and I think we can't ignore it anymore. I think your cryptid researchers have to admit that they have seen orbs in the woods, and they've seen UAPs in the skies. Vice versa, people that are researching, doing sky watches for UAPs, they've heard things moving around. They've seen orbs on the ground. And even the ghost guys, they're starting to say, there seems to be something to this. And, if any serious researcher, if they look into this, they'll see the correlations.
I would agree. So when did you have your first experience of something very strange? Outside of the Meadow Project?
Yeah. Probably when I looked in the mirror first. No, I'm kidding. That's strange enough.
Yeah.
But no, I started, became affiliated with a local paranormal group, which at that time was pretty well known. And, unfortunately, when I graduated university, life gets in the way of living. It just does. I started my career, with the U.S. federal government, and, was invested in that, invested in my family, raising kids. Finally, I had some time to get back into my roots of high strangeness, and started having a lot of experiences with this paranormal group. And your typical, paranormal experiences, disembodied voices, EVP, transmedium communications, and all of that stuff. And we started, I decided to start stepping out a little bit. Maybe I should broaden my horizon, because the founders of the group stepped back, gave me directorship of the paranormal group. And I decided I was going to start looking in places other than haunted houses and hotels and things like this. So I started going out in the woods. And as I started digging into the folklore, if you look at it one-dimensionally, like you mentioned, from strictly a ghost, perspective, a paranormal perspective, if you skew your head just a little bit and you look at it from maybe a ufology and start digging into MUFON and some other reports, and then you skew your head the other way and start looking into DFRO reports, and then you look at the folklore, these things coincide. They're clustered, they're grouped. And if you focus on where these clusters of these 3, 4 different types of the disciplines are, you're really going to find a place that rocks and roll. It's really going to be somewhere neat to investigate and research, and that's kind of what we came across. Yeah.
So I suppose now we can, if you like, we can jump into the Meadow Project. Does that have we covered a lot of the background leading up to that? So we're not going to reveal the location. That's something that you've never done, and I know your reasons why, and I fully respect them as well. But give our listeners an idea of the location, the geology of the land,
Sure.
the makeup of the trees, everything else. So paint a picture for us.
Absolutely. What I would like for your listeners to kind of paint in their mind is we have a mountain range here in the United States called the Appalachians, and it's a very, very old and ancient range of mountains, much younger than the Rocky Mountains out west. So this is in America's Southland and up the eastern coast. So imagine rolling mountains, not craggy peaks like you have in the Rockies, but rolling mountains and hills. And in these mountains, there are meadows or fields, and picture a beautiful meadow or field in the mountains with a large size creek or stream, smallish river on one side, a ridge on the other, and primarily with hardwood, oaks, maples, things like that. Just it's absolutely a beautiful place, and it's just very during the spring and fall, it's very green, very lush. Into winter times, it lacks vegetation, so it's kind of a cold, not barren, but kind of an area without vegetation. But it's really nice. I mean, it's just really nice. It's somewhere you would stumble across and say, wow, I've hiked into this beautiful location. What a great place to have a picnic or spend some time with the family or friends. So, and what happened is I was researching, like I said, the folklore and history of this particular area and heard about a haunted road, and it was one of those things that the locals, and I'm going to use a dialect that's, in this area is, don't go down that road or them Hanks will get you. Hank meaning ghost. And this part of the country, is very Scotch Irish. So a lot of the belief systems have transferred over to the southern United States. So the belief in Hanks, ghosts, things like that is still very real. People still, that's in their cultural DNA. So like, okay, so it's a haunted road. I've been told not to go there. So what do you think I'm going to do? Heck yeah, I'm going to go there. I'm going to go there. I'm that guy. So we decided to do some research on this because it also coincided with Bigfoot sightings. This particular region has a lot of Sasquatch sightings. So we thought, well, maybe that's what people are seeing. So I teamed up with, like I said, Bob Wilson, well-known cryptid researcher here in the States. And we went out there, and Bob opted to stay back at base camp. And another research partner and I went about 20 miles away to the kind of the epicenter of this haunted road. And we didn't see squat. We didn't see anything. It was just kind of a cold, dreary, rainy February evening, temperatures about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, just, not pleasant. We made it back to base camp, and Bob had an amazing story when we got back to base camp. While we were out, he had been drinking copious amounts of warm coffee, trying to stay warm and awake while we were away. And the simple fact of fluid dynamics comes into play. Fluid goes in, fluid's got to go out.
Goes out.
Yeah, it's got to. He'll explode. So, not wanting to explode and make a big mess, Bob decided to get rid of some of this fluid, stepped behind the campsite, was taking care of that biological necessity, and he saw a beam of light come down. No sound, no thunder, just a beam of light. Now, you talked about the box earlier. We all have our normalcy bias. We have what we think is normal, and we try our damnedest to put things in that normal box. So he saw a beam of light on an evening that was heavily overcast and rainy, so the first thing he thought was lightning. Now, he completely rationalized no thunder, but he said it must have been lightning. So once again, he's rationalizing this like we all would, nothing out of the ordinary for a normal human being to do. And then he sees an orb, a giant luminous orb come up in the sky. Once again, trying to fit that into his normalcy bias, that must be the moon, he's thinking. The sky is cleared off, the clouds have abated, and the moon has come out. Oh, hooray, we're going to have a nice weekend. It's going to be clear, maybe warm up. and everything will be, just hunky-dory. We'll really be good. And then the moon started to move sideways from right to left. Now, I don't know about the other side of the Atlantic, but here on this side, the moon doesn't move sideways. It really moves, from horizon to upper sky, then to the other horizon. So this was a bit of a strange thing because it was moving perfectly laterally across his field of vision. So automatically he thought, okay, I can't fit this in the box anymore. This is something unusual. So he's watching it intently. And in the middle of this orb, he sees a small dot, like a very tiny circle. And the circle grows in size until all he's left with is a circle of light, kind of like the necklace of diamonds, the ring of diamonds effect during a solar eclipse.
Yeah.
And then it completely winks out. So he's telling all this, and it's like, forget that haunted road junk. This is where it's happening. We're not even going to waste our time down there anymore. And it just so happens that probably about a half a mile from base camp where this happened, there's a field. There's a meadow, like I just described, about 6 acres, 7 acres in size. And we decided we were going to start focusing our research there for several reasons. Reason number one, it's wide open. If anything moves across it, it's going to leave a track line, and we can follow it. Like if a Sasquatch moves across, it's a natural track, and we can see, what happened there. At night, we can set up in this field or on the periphery with our thermals and our night vision. Anything moves across it, we'll be able to see and record. This comes into play later on. Issue number 3 is up on top of it, there's a ridge. You can set yourself up on the ridge, look down into the meadow, especially during the wintertime, and you can see anything moving down below you. And you can also see anything that you flush as you move across the top of the ridge that you flush down into the meadow. And item number 4 is, being a meadow or a field, you can see the sky. So if there's anything moving across the sky that's anomalous, hopefully you'll be able to see it. So we decided, right. So we decided that's where we're going to start focusing some of our research in this field, just because it was a convenient location for those of you. Not that that anything stuck out that it was an area of high strangeness. So that was, it was probably in 2016. We decided we were going to start, really looking at the. 2016. And we decided we were going to go and take a look at it seriously in July of 2016. Now, it was in the summer, a lot of vegetation out, it was very hot, but that was the first time we were able to get around. And we had some absolutely amazing things happen that kind of set the ball rolling for this entire experience.
Were they peaks and troughs, Trey, or has it just been continuous?
Yeah.
Do you think, when things started to happen, first of all, how many are in the team or were in the team at the time?
We had about 10 people there. So it was a large group. We had, plenty of people. One way we run it is a lot of our members are either former military or former law enforcement. So we kind of look at our operations from that perspective, not that we're a paramilitary group or not, but that way of organization and structure for an operation seems to work, works very well. I'm a former Army officer, so I kind of look at things through that perspective. And so we kind of run things like that. We have a base camp, we have a base camp operator, we have a net control station, a base camp radio operator, we have an operational commander who commands the overall expedition, and then a tactical commander who controls things out in the field. And so, when you're out in the field, sorry.
No, so I guess what I'm thinking, Trey, when you first realized that you were onto something, that we're in an area where things are happening, and I don't mean it's not happening now, but when it started happening, you'll have had a collective of not necessarily excitement, but heightened emotions because it's happening. Did that amplify it? Do you think that brought more excited phenomena through?
Yeah. Here's the weird thing about it, and from your own research there at your location, is this stuff ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's peak, sometimes you go out and nothing happens. But what we have found, even as recently as October, just a few months ago, is it changes. The phenomena evolves, and we have stuff going on now that it doesn't even seem like the phenomena when we first started investigating. You've heard of the hitchhiker phenomena, something following. And now, since then, I've had people driving along darkened roads, heading back from an expedition, and their car completely dies. Where have we heard of that before? Well, one of the best examples, Eddie and Barney Hill, a famous example of that. We've had people see orbs in their homes. In October, I had a film crew come out with me. That's an independent film crew that does little documentaries. And the director wanted to experience an ST session, which is a paranormal investigative tool. And he just told me last week that his film crew, his cinematographer and assistant cinematographer, are very unnerved about going back out there, because while we were doing that ST session, they saw shadow figures all around us where we were doing it. So it's evolving. So it's kind of a roll of the dice when you go out there, what you're going to find. Will we see, more entities and cubes, or will something follow us home, or will it manifest? And we have people being touched now, actually physically being touched. So,
and do you think that's, I mean, I don't know, but do you think that's the more you're becoming aware of it, the more you're watching it, the more the phenomena's watching you and being connected to what you're doing?
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, I think so. I think it's a kind of a combination of those things as we experience this. And let me back up. A lot of my team are trained remote viewers in the military coordinate remote viewing. So they're kind of dialed into that kind of stuff. And I think that as we study it, as we research it, as we get to a point in our own understanding, not only our logical understanding, but our emotional understanding, it's like you have a radio, and you used to have the receiver set to a very narrow frequency. And now we're opening up that band. We're opening up the frequencies. And as we open it up, as our understanding becomes greater, we're receiving more impulses. We're receiving more information. We're receiving more experiences. And so I think it's a combination of both. We've been able to, I believe, and people are free to think whatever they want, is open up a very basic dialogue with whatever is there. And I think it's responding. Nothing dangerous, but I think it does realize that we're
evolving. The situation's evolving, perhaps.
Yeah.
Would you? Where do you? I know you can't answer this, but where would you want it to lead? Where do you see this leading, or is it?
Well,
if you thought about where you would see it leading, like you said, it's just going to throw you off in another direction?
Yeah, and all we can do is try to develop our protocols based on past experiences. A couple of things that we've been doing is designing some experimental packets that we'll place out in the meadow. One of them is a magnetic board with numbers and letters put in a certain way, and that's secured, sealed, put out there under camera surveillance, and see if something responds. So far, that hasn't happened. Something kind of excited, and I'm kind of happy to say this, is that we've actually stepped into this type of experimentation here recently. Is Dr. Persinger and Mr. Corin back a few years ago designed something called a God helmet. And I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Well, a question I was going to ask you later, so let's talk about it now, please.
Well, that's it.
Okay.
If it's not on a helmet, it's on a soft cap. We have acquired this technology, and what we are going to try to do next month is prime the pump, so to speak. Take some of our personnel, run them through some of the Persinger's programs that stimulate electromagnetic stimulations of certain parts of the brain in certain orders, which under his experiments in his laboratory have created visions, experiences of a presence. Some people have reported seeing God, and you'd use that in air quotes, almost a religious epiphany. So what I'm going to do is take some of my volunteers, front load them, prime them by running them through this experimental cycle, and then put them out into the meadow and see what happens. Now, like I said, this is cutting edge. We just came across this technology, and we're just able to procure it 2 weeks ago. So,
are you going to put yourself forward for this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've been experimenting with the technology for the past 2 weeks.
And I know you can't. Are you optimistic that you're going to get results?
Like one of my researchers, he says, just when you think you have this place figured out, it proves that you don't. So
Mm.
I'm looking at this, from a multifaceted perspective. I am, a empirical data kind of guy. I like to capture data. We've captured radiation spikes, on our Geiger counters. We've captured video. We've captured audio, things like that. But my other foot is also in the experiential side of things. And so, we're just going to go out there and see what happens. We're going to have certainly equipment running concurrently with this experiment, EMF detector, tri-field meters, Geiger counters to see if this will elicit some response. Interesting you should ask that, because when we have done the SD protocol in the meadow, where I believe, objectively, I think people could concur with that, have gotten responses while this was going on, we would see tiny radiation spikes. Turn the page. Places like Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, they have likewise seen tiny radiation spikes when phenomena is going on. So I think we're right at the tip of something.
Yeah.
Maybe starting to possibly not understand the phenomena, but at least maybe to understand when it's getting ready to happen,
Yeah.
and maybe some of the indicators of it.
Do you think it would be a good idea, Trey, to liaise and exchange data with people? I'm using myself here, the area
Yeah,
where we're working, other areas of high strangeness around the world, because like you've just said, you're hoping to find out. You might not understand it, I don't, but you might be able to see when things are going to start to, we'd say, bubble to the surface and start happening. It'd be interesting if it's happening in these other locations.
Right, absolutely. I've reached out to various folks that are researching these other areas of high strangeness for several reasons. Number one is I'm just a curious guy. I want to know what cool stuff is going on. But number two is, if their experimentation and their research has yielded results in a certain way, then maybe it can save me some time, and vice versa. Maybe it can save them some time. And that's something that I've always told my team members and guest researchers that come out to the Meadow. Of course, everybody signs an NDA, and the only thing that we want to keep inviolate is the location. The experiences belong to the researchers. Your experience is your experience. Please take that with you and tell the world. There's nothing secret about the experiences. So I'm very open with our on what happens in the experiences, and some of the data. I'm happy to share, because it's not my phenomena. It doesn't belong to me. It's the world's.
Yeah,
and it wouldn't be right
I would
for me.
agree.
Yeah,
I would agree. Have you found any? I'm saying I have been doing, and Bob's been with me. Bob Brown, Bob.
Yeah, Bob. Yeah.
And we've been doing a little experiment. SON, the sounds of nothing, is what we've called it, because we're getting disjointed voices up there. Obviously, nobody, these things, this phenomenon, you've no idea when it's going to happen. So it's it's potluck whether you're going to capture anything. But we've also had temperature fluctuations.
Oh yeah.
So you're finding that as well. So just before, because I'm sure our listeners want to hear about, I don't know, the types of phenomena. We will pigeonhole them, even though we think they're all linked. But just before we jump into that, have you heard high frequency sounds? Have you come across temperature changes? You've just said, oh yes. Give us some examples, if possible.
Yeah, we've had temperature changes. One of the things that I talk about in the book and in my lectures is the cubes or boxes that we saw on our thermal, which it was detected only on thermal, which indicates a temperature variation.
Yeah.
And when we dispatched one of our teams into the area where one of these cubes was, it had since dissipated. They noticed a pretty significant temperature change when they walked in. They felt colder. Going back to another discipline, what's one of the things that ghost researchers talk about when they think an entity is present? A temperature change, a heat sink. So, wow, maybe these are just different ways of looking at the same phenomena. Something we've seen, as I mentioned earlier, radiation spikes. We had an incident where we were out doing some CE5 protocol, Dr. Greer's CE5 protocols, and he's a controversial subject, which is fine, but his some of his protocols work. So we were out doing that, and the base camp team heard, and I'm going to use as descriptive of a word as I can, a craft, a vessel. They don't know if it was they don't know what it was, but something moved past the campsite, past base camp, on this road that was adjacent to it, probably maybe 40 meters from where our base camp was. And to our surprise, their Geiger counter spiked. They went from about a 0.06 microsieverts per hour to a 0.6 microsieverts per hour. So they had this radiation spike when this vessel passed by. We've had disembodied voices like you're talking about. We've had voices out of nowhere. And you're talking about like EVP phenomena. That's exactly what you're saying. Or world-eye voices. Just this very rich tapestry of high strangeness. We've had cryptid sightings. We've had, like I said, disembodied voices. We've had, I had an incident of extreme spatial disorientation, like really, really bad. Like
you personally?
Personally, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
And tell us about it, please.
Yeah, there's an area just when you enter the meadow. And one of my research partners, Kristen P., and she's a emergency room nurse, and she's a highly educated, down-to-earth kind of person. We went out, and our goal that day was to go to the various locations of high strangeness and take baseline readings, radiation, electromagnetic fields, RF energy, and establish a matrix where we could record this stuff, over a period of time and see if there's fluctuations. You're trying to take a very empirical approach to it. So we had got done taking our readings at these various points of high strangeness, and we captured our data, and I was writing it down in a notebook. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a stream, a large stream or small river adjacent to the meadow. And we thought it would be kind of neat, since we had some time, to take off our boots, roll up our trousers, and go across this small river or creek, the stream, and explore what was on the other side, because we hadn't really had time to do that during the daylight. So, I rolled my trousers up, took my boots off, strung them around my neck, and I go across this stream, trying not to get my knickers wet. And so I step out onto the bank, and I'm in a field, in an opening, in another meadow, if you will. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, holy smokes, here's another meadow, another large field opposite of the one that we've been researching. What a great place to do some further research. And I was really excited about it. And I looked around, and nothing really seemed familiar. And I yelled over to Kristen on the other side of the creek. I said, Kristen, there's another field over here. This is really, really cool. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I said, no, it's another large, opening, somewhere where we can research. And she goes, don't go anywhere. Stay where you are. I'm coming to you. And I thought that she was excited to see this new area. And she came over. She goes, Trey, what are you talking about? And I said, no, it's another field. We need to come up with some protocols to research over there. She goes, Trey, you're back in the meadow. I said, no, I'm not. I've been to the meadow like 50 or 60 times. This isn't the same place. And to give a little background on myself is, I'm an Eagle Scout in the Boy Scouts of America. I've earned the 50-mile award 3 times from backpacking and canoeing. I've hunted big game in Africa and in the United States. I'm a former Army officer, intelligence guy. So, I'm comfortable with, the woods, the wilderness, and all of that. So, I don't get spooked real easy. I did not know where I was. And when she said, you are back to where you started, this is the place we've been researching for the past few years. And this is kind of hard to articulate, but it's like everything shifted and then went back to normal. And as I started looking around, it all was recognizable now. Yeah, I knew exactly where I was. And she called back to base camp, said, guys, something's wrong with Trey. He's confused at where he is. And of course, we had another medic back at base camp said, he needs to come back to base camp now, and we need to check him out. and I was both operational and tactical control over both of the expedition and that particular outing. I said, okay, I'm just going to put my foot down. No, I'm not coming back now. Everybody leave me alone for about 10 minutes. Just don't call me on the radio. Just let me get my wits back about me. And finally, I kind of, everything seemed, more normal, and I went back to base camp. What's interesting is when that happened, we had a radiation spike. It went
Right.
from 0.050607 microsieverts per hour up to 0.3 microsieverts per hour. Not dangerous radiation, but a significant enough of a spike. Once again, those radiation spikes when we have incidences of high strangeness. Now, luckily, because of some things that had happened previously, where we think we've had some near misses with stuff, our protocol is nobody goes out by themselves. Nobody goes out without radio communications. Nobody goes out with a compass and or GPS. And if we hadn't had those protocols in place, would I have been a chapter in one of David Paulides' missing 401 books? Would they have found my boots, 10 miles away on a mountaintop? Thankfully, we don't know. We were able to.
It's frightening to think, to sort of ponder over, Trey, isn't it, really? But what did you, obviously, when you were in the moment, when you were immersed in that situation, you weren't actually aware you were in it until somebody alerted you to it. So asking you if there were a change in temperature, asking you if there were a difference in sunlight, you wouldn't have noticed, did you?
No, it seemed, it seemed perfectly normal to me. It was literally, in the most realistic way I can describe it, is I really thought that I had crossed the creek from bank A to bank B, from the, get my bearings here, from the southern bank to the northern bank, and I had walked into another field, another opening, another meadow.
But you had walked into something, or something had enveloped you, whichever it comes first, kind of thing. It's fascinating.
And then I'm going to throw another kink into it. Now this is where things get even stranger. About a year later, and let me look at my notes. It was in July of 2020. The disorientation was in January of 2020. This is in July. We went back that summer. And in the area where we crossed, and I crossed and ended up back where I started, in the creek, there was a small island. And when I say small, I'm talking maybe 10 foot by 2 foot, very, very tiny little marshy
narrow strip.
Strip. And in that strip, there was a sapling, maybe about an inch and a half in diameter, 12 feet tall. And at the top of that sapling, there was a perfect oval, exactly like the oval on the top of an ankh.
Really?
Also like what you see in various sites that they call the galactic keyhole. Okay, that keyhole kind of shape, the oval with a vertical. Nothing could have made that sapling or that oval that we could figure out.
That shape.
You can't bend it down because it would have broke, and you couldn't put a ladder up against it. It was too tall to reach, but yet there it was. And the interesting thing about areas with what they call the galactic keyhole, they're usually areas that have some folkloric or tradition where these areas are gateways to something else, to another reality. So it's really interesting that oval on the sapling turned out at exactly the same place where I became disoriented and went somewhere and started back where I began from without realizing it.
Did it frighten you after?
I look back on it now, and because I have a very good team that are very dialed in and we're very protective of one another, I'm not frightened because we have the protocols in place to prevent something from happening in as much as we can. What is a little unnerving is what could have happened. And I would be remiss if, I didn't say this kind of research, this kind of delving into high strangeness has dangers. It's dangerous. Okay. We've had a team member die. We've had to medevac team members from the forest that had, all of a sudden cardiac issues that came out of nowhere. Extreme disorientation, things like that. And it's not for the weak-hearted. You really have to have your mind set on what you're doing and be okay with that, because sometimes it gets a little strange and sometimes it gets dangerous.
Absolutely. So just before we go to a few questions, because I'm hoping there are a few, I've not been looking at the chat, but I hope we can touch on a few of the different phenomena that's been presenting. I mean, let's start with the orbs, the spheres of light, and let's move through to UFOs. The cryptids. So let's start with the orbs, and then we'll see whether Les has got some questions after the orbs.
Yeah, we've had orbs. We see one of the phenomena that we'll see out there are orbs, flashes of light. Almost like somebody takes a flash gun and ignites it, in the forest, kind of a bright.
So we've got daylight for a second.
Yes.
We get that. Yeah.
I was going to say, it sounds like you've experienced it too.
Yeah.
And that's what I tell people. It's like somebody had a camera flash gun and just, ignites it, and it just lights everything up for, a millisecond.
Yeah.
And, I personally
Imagine the energy to do that, though. Because I know what you're talking about, Trey, even though we've never discussed it, and it's literally lighting a massive area up, and then it's gone.
And it's gone.
Sorry, I cut you off in mid-flow there. Carry on, sorry.
Yeah, like it never happened. It's just like poosh, and then it's gone. We've experienced that. We've seen, orbs up on top of the ridge. Something I forgot to mention is when Bob had his UAP experience with the moon, is he also saw orbs up on top of the ridge. It's interesting that our base camp operator has actually confused those orbs with us coming back into base camp.
Torches.
He came on the radio and said, "Oh, I see you guys are coming back, to base camp. You have your green lenses on your torches. Why are you coming up over the top of the ridge and not using the trail?" And it's like, Glenn, who was a base camp, we're still in the meadow. And he goes, "Oh, wait. These torches are 20 or 30 feet above the ground." And, they were green orbs. UAP'S. We had, of course, the orb thing, the big moon thing that we talked about earlier. There's an area not too far from the meadow, and this isn't a tightly located area of high strangeness. It's kind of a little bit broader area, maybe about 5 miles, around this area. So myself and a research partner were at a area called Stevens Lake, very good visibility, almost horizon to horizon. And what we saw was a series of 2 lights. And when they appeared, I actually thought that they were a radio tower that for some reason I had not noticed over the past years. There's 2 series of lights blinking like this, starting high in the sky, not like an aircraft would come low on the horizon and up. It started high, and to the naked eye, they looked stationary. And I had a nice pair of 10 power binoculars I brought up, looked at them, and that each light was actually a set of 2 lights perpendicular, flashing on and off.
Were they kind of at the 10 o'clock and the 5 o'clock position?
These would be, if I looked at them, it would be at the 1 o'clock and the 7 o'clock from my position.
Yeah, similar thing, because we see lights out
like
to sea in that position. Yeah.
And so, I'm also a MUFON field investigator, so I'm kind of familiar with, aircraft lights. I took my binoculars and I'm looking for the rotating red anti-collision lights. I'm looking for the red and green navigation lights. I'm looking for the white anti-collision light on top of the aircraft. And the big thing that's a giveaway, of course, is the rotating anti-collision beacon on the bottom of the aircraft. Saw none of that. We had seen aircraft the whole evening, and this didn't match any lighting pattern for any of those. And they were this is where it's weird. They were so stationary. It almost looked they were hanging there. That's why I originally thought that it was maybe an anti-collision beacon on a radio tower. But as they blinked, they slowly moved down below the horizon. So I went back and I got on what's called FR-24, which is a tracking program for all flights in that area. I went back historically to see if there were any aircraft. And like a good researcher, I had my longitude and latitude of exactly where I was. I had an azimuth off of where I saw them, and I had a number of degrees above the horizon, and no aircraft corresponded with this. I have nothing. It was really weird. And you go back and you look at the MUFON reports for this region, this area, and it's rife. There are tons of them. So
Yep.
that was, and we captured this on film. We had a psionics night vision camera, digital night vision camera, so I was able to capture these UAPs on film, which is kind of cool.
What colour were this, Trey?
They were white.
Yeah, because we use a psionics, and I do like them, but I don't think that they give a true representation of the colour. A lot of the things we see are orange, and they come out white.
Right, and the thing is, I did have my 10F binoculars, so I was able to take a pair of actual optics and look at it, and they were white.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can follow up on some of these light forms, and maybe some if you believe you've seen something like a structured craft. But are you happy to take a few questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do my best.
Great. Yeah, have we got any, Les?
Yes, we have lots of questions. Thanks, everybody on the chat, for sending these questions through. Some really, really good ones on here. And I've got to, first of all, start off by saying thanks to, is it Joe Novak, for sending the super chat through tonight. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. And I'll start off with a question from Don Lodge. If you're still in the stream, Don, welcome to the show. And Don Lodge is asking for Trey, what is the most convincing UFO report of all time?
Of all time. Probably one of the most convincing to me, and this is the aerial South Africa sighting, Zimbabwe sighting, excuse me, of I think it was 1994. And several reasons for that is, even though the witnesses were all students at the aerial private school there outside of Harare, Zimbabwe, the number of witnesses, and when they got these children separated and asked them to relay what they saw, orally, and draw what they saw, the similarities were remarkable. And what makes it more believable is if Paul saw something and I saw something, and then we're separated and we're relating it, we will both respond and give a similar story, but they're not going to be exactly the same because of perception. And there was enough of a perceptive difference in the recollections of these children that added an air of authenticity. And the famous psychiatrist John Mack actually went down and talked to the children. And he not only did it as a UAP back then, a UFO researcher, but also went down as a child psychiatrist. And he was convinced, pretty significantly, that these children did see a craft land. And out of that craft, they did see humanoid figures dressed in black bodysuits. And I think when you look at it totally, it's kind of hard to discount that. Now, probably, and I'm kind of biased on this because this is a report by the U.S. Department of Defense, and that's the agency I work for. So, take that for what it's worth. But the gimbal, Tic Tac, and Go Fast videos that came out, I think those are very significant for several reasons. Number one is you take arguably one of the most advanced airframes in the world, the F-18 Hornet. On that airframe, you equip it with some of the most advanced detection technologies: radar, IR, optical, and ELINT, electronic intelligence. All of these phenomenology that this particular platform can detect. And then in this platform, you take individuals that are highly trained and highly educated, most likely with advanced degrees in aeronautical engineering. They understand how aircraft move, and more importantly, they understand how aircraft cannot move. So you take all of these and you put it out there over the Pacific Ocean off the coast of the United States, and they detect this phenomena, these trans-medium vessels, these transmedium craft, whatever you want to call them. They can't explain it. It's moving in non-ballistic ways. It's starting and stopping. You've got the 5 observabilities. And these expert witnesses cannot explain it. They cannot pigeonhole it. And then the U.S. Department of Defense, similar to y'all's MOD, comes out and says, we don't know what they are. In government speak, that is their UAPs. And I think probably those 2 sightings or those 2 incidences, a group of incidences, are probably the most convincing for me. And I actually have had engineers and scientists come up to me that I know personally after the DoD disclosure a few years ago and asked me what my opinion was. I said, well, I believe something is out there for decades. And a very competent engineer looked at me and he shook his head and goes, they're real, aren't they? And I said, yes, they are. And only a fool would believe that they're not now.
Yeah, I think you're right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for that, Trey. And I've just had a few comments in the chat saying about Trey's audio a little bit distorted. Now I think Trey is coming in okay on through my earphones here.
He is on mine, so
yeah. So I think we can only put it down to YouTube compression when it goes out to you guys, and obviously whatever devices you're listening on will affect how Trey is coming across. So sorry if you are experiencing that.
But I'm assuming there is clarity of words because, and I do appreciate.
Really, there's really nothing we can do about it
okay.
on this occasion. Right, I'll go on with another question, and the question is from Fred Flintstone. Fred Flintstone, and this one is, the question is, stone throwing is a feature of both cryptid and poltergeist behaviour. Are they connected, Trey?
That's a great question. This is a great one. This is a great question because can we separate the 2 disciplines? Poltergeist, ghosts, spirits, haunts, whatever you want to call them, and cryptids. Stone throwing, we've experienced that. We've had sounded like large rocks thrown in the creek near the meadow. And guess what area of the creek they were thrown in?
Where the tree is.
Yeah, right at that location. So turn the page. Sasquatch or Bigfoot or cryptids. There have been a lot of reports, and I'm not talking about 1 or 2, but many, many reports of people talking about these creatures disappearing. Like people will see them one moment and then poof, they're gone. Or they'll find a track trail of something walking through, the forest or walking through a field or, mud flat or whatever, and the footprints start, go a distance, and then stop. How does that happen? So there's some theories, and I think that we have to, if we're honest with ourselves, we have to consider this, is that what we call Sasquatch or Bigfoot or the hairy man or whatever, and this is very rich in folklore. You're going, European here in the States, very rich folklore of wild men. Are they transdimensional? Are they something that can come in and out of existence as we know it? And, I have to wonder that, and I'll tell you why. Human beings are transdimensional creatures, okay? That's why we can do remote viewing with training. That's why we sometimes have precognition, and that's how that stuff works, and there's a whole, religious and philosophical, backing to that too. So if human beings are transdimensional creatures, and a Sasquatch supposedly is maybe even more like a human being than a chimpanzee, which is 99% genetic similarities, would it not stand to reason that these creatures are also transdimensional and maybe have tapped into something that we have yet to discover because we're so busy with informational clutter, educational clutter. We're told what to think, what is real and what isn't, that we've lost that ability and maybe they've regained it, or maybe even better, have never lost it.
Yeah, I would agree with that entirely, and it's probably an attribute, and I do think that these things are slipping in and out of our existence, back into some other unknown other. But you know, maybe that is their attribute, this ability, and they probably never lost it. We may just never have had it, or we may have had it, but there's too many. I don't. This is your show, Trey, so I'm not going to dwell on it. But there's too many things seen along the research area of East and North Yorkshire that shouldn't be there, and couldn't sustain and forge an existence in these areas. I mean, we don't have the vast forests and woodlands that you've got in America, yet people are seeing them. Diverse cross of a population are seeing these things. So they've got to be coming from somewhere. I know I don't have the answer on it. I ain't got the handle, but yeah, I do agree, Trey. But,
if we had the answer, it wouldn't be fun, would it?
Well, we wouldn't be sat here debating it, would we? That's true. And we're getting great questions like what Mr. Flintstone's just asked us.
So, yabba dabba do.
Yeah, or yabba dabba do question. So, another one, Les.
Okay, Bobby Dazzler. Bobby Dazzler is asking, the strange suited woman who turned up with her son, what did Trey make of her son? And has he done anything further to check her out? And did she attend the same university as him?
That's a great question. And that's somebody who's either heard me on interviewed before or read my book. So thank you for that. That is the mysterious businesswoman of the forest. This is a strange thing. It still kind of weirds me out even to this day. Is when we had the very strange phenomena with the cubes or portals, there was a woman waiting for us back at base camp. Now imagine February, a cold evening in a forest that's so remote, we don't even have cellular signals there. That's how remote this area is. We come back into base camp and there's a woman waiting there, a businesswoman, standing there in the middle of the forest at 10:30 at night, 22-30 hours, wearing loafers, slacks, a blouse, and a blazer. It makes no sense. Who wanted us to stop what we were doing and follow her down a deserted county road to look for something that she called monkey bears. Now, I know what a gummy bear is. I know what a grizzly bear is, but I don't know what a monkey bear is. That's a new one on me. So she actually claimed to have gone to the same university as me. And then she claimed to have the same degree as I did. And then when I pushed her further, she actually named people that I knew personally at the university. So what are the odds of a businesswoman being in the forest at the exact same time we had this experience, trying to dissuade us from doing our after action review, acting very strange? I went to the same university, have the same degree, and knows the same people I do.
Did she unnerve you, Trey?
Very much. I mean, it still weirds me out to today.
When you tried to question her or push her for information, and I don't mean you're not good at what you do as regards asking questions, but did you find that she was one step in front of you?
Yeah, we actually were able to get her name and pin down her profession. Now we went back and did some data mining, and some of my training throughout my career, I've been taught how to do that. So we dug down a little bit, and we found a social media profile of a person that matched this. We pulled up the photographs from this social media profile, and it was the same person. So this appeared to be a real person, we think. Okay, and this is where the story starts getting a little strange. Years later, I was contacted by a psychotherapist in Istanbul, Turkey, who coincidentally had gone to the same university as the both of us, as the mysterious lady and myself. And he was asking about something called the Carrollton Vortex, which was a area of high strangeness in the town where this university was located. Asked if I knew anything about it, which I didn't. This individual had also studied under Dr. William Roll. So, we had some similarities. And we were talking, and he said, hey, I heard you in an interview talk about this woman. Can you give me her name? And I said, sure, her name is Jane Doe. Obviously, that's not a real name. And he says, I think I know her. He says, would you mind if I contacted her and asked her a few questions? I said, no, not at all. But actually, I would love to talk to her. I'm not interested in outing her. She did that thing where she urinated in front of us and was acting really crazy and strange, So, I don't want to risk her licensure or anything like that. I'm very curious. And he went to her and he asked her, was this you? And she goes, yes, that was me. is I had a very hard day at work, and I had gone out to unwind by driving around in the forest. During the earlier part of the day, I had driven past their campsite and saw a decal or a sticker or something that made me think they were associated with cryptid research. And, we have like little stickers on the back of our vehicles and trucks and all of that. And so she came back strangely later that night at about 10:30, which is kind of odd. And she says, I wanted them to follow me to where my sister and I would see these things called monkey bears in this old abandoned cabin. And my friend, he later became a friend, says, do you remember anything else about that evening? And she says, I remember they seemed like they were involved with something else, and they weren't rude, but they weren't overly friendly. Like they had something else that they needed to do, and they just wanted me to leave, which was accurate. We wanted to do our after action review and debrief. And she said, I just got in my car and left. And she was with her son, which was very quiet, would not engage with us. Or a person she said was her son. I'll just clarify that. And my friend said, is there anything else you remember strange about the evening? And she goes, no, not at all. So she had no recollection of urinating in front of us or any of that strangeness. And I asked my friend, I said, what do you make of that? He goes, that's really interesting. He said, because when we were at university, we would do some parapsychology, and she was the one that was always very receptive. And I talked about a person's receiver being very narrowly set on a frequency. Hers is very wide. And he goes, she's the type of person that could be influenced by something. And I started thinking about this because her activities and her attributes during that evening fit the typical men in black kind of attitude. Not properly dressed, doesn't understand, you don't pee in front of people, you don't unless you know them really, really well. And, trying to dissuade you from recollecting your high strangeness experience, things like that. So maybe these men in black and women in black, maybe some of them are actual people that are influenced by something. And I believe, Paul, you had an experience in a village with an individual.
Well, literally about 50 yards from where I'm sat now, the bottom of the road. It was going through my mind as you were talking about it. And yeah. I'll make it really quick because it could last 10 minutes. But basically, my wife and I encountered this man, stopped me, kept telling me I was bringing down the light, I was causing big problems, I knew what I was doing. There's a lot more to the story. It started before, we were waiting for us when we came back from dropping a phone off, to be honest with you. And yeah, very unnerving. And briefly, 1966, 4 miles away, 3 fishermen in a fishing cobble hauling crab pots at Flamborough, just in between Flamborough and Bempton, all ducked as they saw a reflection on the water and looked up, and there's a sphere of light above them, but not miles above them, literally feet above them, baseball size, zipped off. There's more to this story, but the important part for you, Trey, and for this, what you're talking about, is when they got back, there's no 1966, no walkie-talkies, no mobile phones, and these are fishermen, educated and skilled men at what they do, but that's what they do. When they get back to Flamborough, there's men in suits waiting for them to speak to them about what they've seen. How could that be? It made the local papers, and I managed to speak to 2 of them. And yeah, there's similarities.
Yeah, like Shakespeare said, there's more to heaven and earth than in your books, Horatio. Yeah. It's a very strange world.
It certainly is. More questions, Les?
Yes.
Are you happy to keep answering these questions, Trey?
Yeah, sure. My time is yours. I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. Well, it's all good.
Andrew Sheehan is asking a good question. There's no dead Sasquatch remains have ever been found. What does Trey believe happens when they die?
Oh, that's a great question. Here in North America, a couple of ways to look at this. I'm gonna go with the standard biological way that people put out there, and then I'm gonna say something a little bit stranger. is you don't find the remains of large animals very often in the wilds of North America. Several reasons is you have animals will feed on that carcass down to the bones, and then you will have other animals come that will eat the bones for the calcium content. So they'll nibble on the bones, and you might find, a leg bone or a rib bone or something, but you don't find bear remains very often. You don't find elk remains very often. Large animals like that. So that is the Occam's razor. That's the simplest attribute. Number two is it reasonable to believe that maybe these creatures have a culture and have a cultural funerary ritual where they'll either bury or burn or maybe even eat the remains of their deceased. Neanderthals, started developing a funeral custom, for their deceased loved ones and friends. The third possibility, and I kind of touched on this earlier, is maybe these things go somewhere else when they die. That's not in this dimension. That's not trapped in this Euclidean understanding we have of the universe. Maybe they go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, I believe at least our essence goes somewhere else. It's a transdimensional essence. But maybe not only does their essence go away, but maybe their physical bodies go away somewhere too that we have yet to even comprehend.
Yeah, great question. Tough one to answer, but or attempt to answer. It's good.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a question from Lorraine Groves. Welcome to the show, Lorraine.
Hi, Lorraine.
So far, how many areas of high strangeness does Trey believe have been found worldwide?
Oh, excellent question. Excellent. We have several that we're all very familiar with. Of course, Skinwalker Ranch. Now, the Meadow. We have the Clearview, Colorado Ranch, which if you go out there, you can find out about that one. We have here in the States the Bradford Ranch, Stardust Ranch, and I'm gonna butcher this. Haobacu Forest in Romania is one that's really well known. You have the Alagora Forest, I believe that's right, in Japan, the famous suicide forest. There are these areas of high strangeness, and there in the UK, years ago, I was, there on Salisbury Plain and, went to Stonehenge. That area has a very unique feel to it. It's kind of hard to explain. And so, folklorically, you go back and you look at stuff, in in Europe, and then bring it, of course, over here. We have Native American folkloric stories. In Europe, you have stories of the Fae and things like that. I think there are a whole lot of these places. These are just some of the areas that people, like Paul's area, that we have either stumbled across or found through research. But the really neat thing is, I think if people start looking for clusters of ghost sightings, cryptid sightings, UFO sightings, and they look at these clusters, they might even have one of these areas in their own backyard.
I totally agree. And I've said this many times, Bempton, the Meadow Project, Huachuca Forest, although they're special places as when it comes to the unexplained and sightings of the unusual, these places exist all over the world. It just takes a bit of intense research, like what you and your team are doing, to expose these areas. You haven't created the Meadow Project, Trey, because the things will have been happening long before.
Right.
It's the same where I am. I'm not breaking new ground here. I'm just pouring a lot of time and effort into it, and it's highlighting the strangeness. But so I love that answer, Trey. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's it's one of those things that taking, and I'm not picking on folks that are starting into research. I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. But people who think they can go buy a digital voice recorder and a very, very low end camcorder, go out there and sit in a location for 2 hours, see something or not see something, and call that good. That's not it. It's years, literally years and years and years of research with some very expensive equipment and a lot of hours behind that equipment trying to capture this fleeting phenomenon. But like anything else that's worth doing, the rewards are well worth the effort.
You just need one, and you'll know this, and people in the chat will know it, and people will listen to this afterwards. If you're involved and entrenched in subject, you can sit there for 6 months, or you can be there for a long time, months, nothing but one. You only need even a 20-second, a 10-second episode of strangeness, and it just feeds you for that next bout of nothingness. And I think that's what it's all about. I mean, I bet it's not happening all the time where you're researching, but I would imagine, because you come on podcasts and you're talking about it, and I do a similar thing, and there's no disrespect to people who think this, but they think that they could go there and something's immediately going to happen.
Yeah.
And all I say to them is, you're in an area, if you were in the Meadow Project area or Eastern North Yorkshire, the Bempton Speaton area, where there's a higher probability of something happening, but it's not forced to happen. But I'm rambling here, so...
That's fine. Like if you know there's a lake with fish in it, there are fish in it.
There's more
You
chance
go
of catching.
fishing and you might not catch anything. That doesn't mean there aren't fish there. It just means there weren't fish there while you were there.
Yeah, spot on. Les, question?
Yeah, I've got a question. Yeah, and really, really enjoying the show tonight. And
Well, I saw somebody say in the chat, Les, and I'm sorry for cutting across you, that this is the best guest we've had on. So you're definitely entertaining people. Sorry, Les, fire away.
Trey, it looks like you've earned respect of everybody in our live stream this week, and I've got to agree. And going back to the quality of the questions that we get in the stream, Trey, are absolutely phenomenal, and every respect to all the people that come on, the really intelligent questions that we ask. And thanks everybody for forwarding these questions. With that out of the way, I'll go on to Patricia Adams Wright. And Patricia is asking, I think you've touched on it earlier, but it's probably an all-encompassing question. Trey, do you think these phenomena are extraterrestrial or multi-dimensional?
Excellent question. Yeah, I love this question, and I'm going to pull out a quote right here because I'm a note-taking and reading kind of guy. Is John Keel in my notes here? Talks about them as being ultra-terrestrials. That's what he calls them, ultra-terrestrials. I have a term that I use, and I call them paradimensionals, meaning outside of our dimension. I think that ghosts, the transitional nature of some we've seen for Sasquatch, and UAP'S is it's multi-dimensional. I think that's why UAPs are transmedium. That's why they can go into the ocean, come out of the ocean. They're there for one moment, they're not. And I think that there are places on the earth which coincide with areas of high strangeness where the boundaries between the dimensions gets really thin. Now, whether this is a natural occurrence or something that's manufactured, I don't know. But I think when the boundaries between you can have beings, you can have items, and you can have consciousness transfer between these multi-dimensions. And that's why I think that I see spikes of radiation, because if you go and look at black holes, where you have an event horizon and a singularity, it's giving out bursts of X-rays. So I think that's what it is we're actually seeing either the shadows, I can get into tesseract cubes and all of that. I can get really far down this rabbit hole. We're either seeing shadows of transdimensional beings and objects, or we're actually interacting with those objects as they come into our dimension. So that's an excellent question. Thank you.
And can I just start a question of my own, Trey? Because the question is simply this, is that these areas of high strangeness, what you've just mentioned, in this area where Paul is investigating, there's a lot of military bases. Is there any link between where these military bases are placed and places of high strangeness, do you think?
Ooh, that, kind of based on my background with DOD, siting of military bases is usually very pragmatic. Access to water, your waterways, access to highways, infrastructure, plenty of open land. If you're going to build an air base, you need to have flat area, without a lot of mountains around, so you can land aircraft and take aircraft off. And I think if the government, be it the UK government or the US government, were involved in these areas of high strangeness, I think they would be a bit more covert than to try to build a military base, in the same locations. Now that goes back to this correlation create causality. No, not necessarily. It just maybe because you have military bases that have populations around them, people are out in the woods and looking, and maybe they're finding these places, and it just happens to be where the people are. So I don't think there's a direct correlation, and I could be wrong, but that's just my opinion.
So, unless Leslie wants to add any more to that, dear Les, do you think that the phenomena? Sorry, do you think that the military are aware of you and what you're doing?
Well, yeah, that's kind of a loaded question. Is
what you're
based,
involved in, then,
yeah,
not what you do.
yeah. Well, based on my day job, yeah, they're aware of what I do because I talk about it. I work with counterintelligence agents professionally from time to time. They're interested in it just because we're friends and they're interested in what I do. One special agent even has an autographed copy of my book. The weird thing is I've never been approached by anybody in Department of Defense. They're aware of it in a peripheral kind of way. If they've shown any kind of interest, it has not been in any way that I've noticed. But I do know for a fact that when Robert Bigelow owned Skinwalker Ranch there in the Uinta Valley in Utah, is a classified contract was let for his National Institute of Discovery Science to do some research there on behalf of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA here in the U.S. So I know that they're interested in it. I know that they at least have awareness of these areas, but I haven't detected or sensed any particular interest in my area.
Okay. Are we going with questions, Les? Do you want to?
I've got a question. Yeah, I've got a question from Chris from the Outer Limits magazine. If he's still on the stream, Chris. The question is, hi Trey, in past interviews, you mentioned the site goes through periods of inactivity.
Mm-hmm.
Anything going on currently? And if no, what do you believe is the reason?
I think like anything, things ebb and flow. Kind of like the fishing analogy. Sometimes you catch fish, sometimes you don't. The phenomena has, like I said, has evolved. We have much more of a hitchhiker phenomena now. Things following people home. We've had people's GPSs in their automobiles and on their phones, on their trekking back home, take them in circles like there's some sort of geomagnetic anomaly there. We're not having people physically touched. And I've had guest researchers from other states come down and research with us that have been touched. So it's starting, it doesn't look like what you would think an area like this would look like. You would think, okay, it's you see a Bigfoot or you see a Sasquatch and you see a UAP and maybe you capture an entity or some sort of figure on your thermal. But now it's more like ghost stuff, paranormal stuff, which is really interesting because, I started recording this stuff and taking, statements down from my team members. And then a book comes out called the Pentagon, Skinwalkers in the Pentagon. And they are starting to disclose the exact same phenomena when Bigelow's MIDS team was out there at Skinwalker Ranch. Seeing things, at home. I've had orbs, form in people's houses. I've had things that I'll put down in the room I'm in right now, turn my head, and they're gone. I'll tear the whole place up looking for it. I'll wake up, come back in here the next morning, and it's right there where I put it. So, I mean, it's typical, poltergeist phenomena or trickster phenomena. The trickster phenomena seems to be very, very, very plain. Are very present, in these areas. So it's constantly evolving. That's the kind of the cool thing is, like I'd said before, a friend of mine, one of my research partners says, when you think you have this area figured out, the meadow, you don't. It'll throw a curveball, like in baseball. So we still have stuff going on. The shadow person phenomena was reported by the film crew as recently as October. So yeah, it's still very active, but when you go in expecting one particular phenomena, you might not get what you expect.
I've suggested in past, and just throwing it out there, that what if this is one all-encompassing phenomena, almost like a hive mind? And I'm not saying that's what it is, but that could be why we're seeing different aspects, different types of phenomena. It's maybe almost like a display of what I can do. And what do you think to that idea?
Yeah, it's a couple of ways to look at that. One analogy that I like to use is the ants in the forest analogy. Is imagine you have a forest and you have an ant colony in this forest, and the Department of Forestry or whomever comes and they build a roadway, asphalt roadway through the forest. Remote area, first time it's ever had a roadway. So these ants are going about their little ant business and they come across this roadway. They have no frame of reference for what in the heck a roadway is.
Mm.
So they stand there, they have this roadway, and they're sending out their ant pheromones trying to communicate it. And it is so outside of their understanding of the world and the universe, they can't even begin to comprehend what this thing is. And I have to wonder if that's what we're seeing, is if we're just starting to detect and comprehend, or not comprehend, but detect and sense this phenomena going on. And the end state or the reason for the phenomena is so alien to us, so other, that we can't even begin to grasp what it's all about. So that's kind of where I'm at now. Is I go in and I let the experience happen. I do my best to record it. I do my best to experience it. And if I can capture any empirical data, be it RF energy, radiation, or whatever, audio, video, I do my best. And like the ant in the forest, will we ever be able to comprehend the roadway? Maybe not, but it certainly is interesting trying to.
Yeah, without a doubt. And thank you. And we'll move on to another question. If I'm happy to answer the questions if you are, Trey. Well, your questions for the most part, because at the end of the stream, Les usually gets bombed by people who tell him you didn't have to tell my question. So
yeah.
Let him have a go at them, and let's see whether you can answer them, Trey.
Thank you for that, Paul. Yes, I try and get through as many questions as we can. And question, Bobby Dazzler. It's going back to the lady in the woods, the woman in the woods, and she's quizzical that she had her son with her in the car.
Yeah,
so,
she did. She had her son with her, or who she claimed was her son, a male of about 15 years old. Wasn't really engaging at all. The kid, what he reminded me of, and this is not an indictment, this is just my perception, is almost like you would have an autistic individual that isn't processing the data. They're just sort of there in their own world, and they're processing the stimuli as it comes in. And they might not respond in a way that we're used to, or their interactions might not be in a way that we're used to or the way we would expect. But he was there physically.
Did he speak?
He did speak some. I do remember him asking if we had firearms with us, which was kind of an odd, off-the-wall question. That's usually not something you would just come up to somebody and ask them. So I have to wonder if his means and modes of communication were maybe different than what we were used to, i.e. possibly autistic. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. But he was also very odd. He just sat, at this table, in this seat, there in our campsite, and just didn't move. He just sat there. Wasn't too interested in engaging with us other than asking the firearm question, which, of course, I start thinking, as somebody that did anti-terrorism stuff in Afghanistan and all that, it's like, why would you ask that question? Are you trying to determine, do we have means to protect ourselves? Is this a setup for, an attack or a robbery or something? So it's just the whole situation was just very,
a lot of things just flooded through your mind. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that, Bobby Dazzler, and well spotted. Susan71 is asking, do you think there is a crossbreeding facility that they are releasing them into the wilderness?
Yeah, yeah. Now, hopefully you're not talking about my neighbors down here in the Southland. No, no, I'm kidding. I know you're obviously talking about Sasquatch. There's been a lot of people that talk about that, either Sasquatch or, I was kind of joking, but there's been a lot of discussion about hybrid humans that are, ET and, and human. That's not something I've really delved into a whole lot. I've got my hands pretty much full researching, what I have, but there's a lot of people that believe that. And who knows what, if we peel back the veneer of what we think is real and normal, what lurks in individuals' DNAs, what's in this mysterious woman's DNA, if we were ever able to find out. So, it's one of those mysteries that, maybe we'll never find the answer to.
Thank you. Well,
Okay, and let's have a look. John Donnelly. Hi, Paul.
Hi, John.
This one's for you, Paul. Sorry, Trey.
Right.
Yeah, and I heard you on Sasquatch Chronicles with Wes. Excellent interview, and I can't wait to see your new movie.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it gives me a chance to boast about it, I suppose, because that's all I seem to be doing at the moment, because we're proud of it, myself and Les. So thank you, John. Yeah, and have a listen to the interview that I did with Wes, Sasquatch Chronicles. I'm going to be doing another one. We did 2, and I'm going to be doing another one, and no doubt we will talk about Wolflands once again. And as Trey rightly points out, the multi-phenomena events that are taking place in and around the areas where these things are happening. So I'm so pleased to be speaking with Trey, because I know we're on the same page with most of this.
Yeah.
So have we more questions, Les, or are we moving on to something else?
I want to get this one in because it's kind of related. It's kind of related to where Trey left off a few minutes ago. Richard Van is asking, Trey, do you think any of your team have any kind of disability? Because you talked to the boy maybe having some kind of autistic.
That's a good question, Richard. We actually had a team member die, which it's still kind of hard to deal with, even though it was back in 2020. We've had one team member die. We've had another team member's cancer came back with a vengeance. We had one team member that had a cardiac issue that was evaded, pop up out of nowhere. It was so severe, we literally had to medevac him out of our base camp to a hospital. I have another individual who's now has serious pulmonary issues. Is this a coincidence? Possibly. If you go back and you start looking at some of the literature coming out now, is people who have had encounters with high strangeness oftentimes have some sort of physical malady that coincides with it. The famous Nash Lundgren, case where, she actually appeared to have radiation poisoning. And it's not just my location. There's a guest researcher that I work with quite a bit, and I'm not really authorized to disclose this, so I'm not going to give his name. But he was in an area here, also in America's Southland, and he had something akin to radiation poisoning that affected the nature of his blood. He was not producing white cells like he should. And what was weird about it is his dad and he were at a location that was kind of known for high strangeness, not the meadow, came down with headaches, feeling faint. His mom, who remained in their vehicle, did not. The vehicle, in my opinion, acted like a Faraday cage, which might not protect you from radiation, but it would protect you from RF energy. Turn the page. Some of the things that people are experiencing is very similar to exposure to high frequencies of microwave energy. I'm talking about like 1.2 to 1.6 gigahertz causes something that people have called the Havana syndrome. which can cause damage to your brain. My mind is completely blank. There's a physiologist who has been studying some of this stuff in the United States. What is his name? Nolan, I think. And he's been doing MRI scans of the brains of people who have had incidences of high strangeness occur near them, and he's seeing things that look like multiple sclerosis in their brains. So I actually had a chance to talk to a pretty well-known neuroradiologist here in this area, and we're trying to figure out, maybe our team has some of this. Something we're going to do, and I'm trying to get the logistics worked up, is do hypnotic regression for some of my team members, because I think, this is just my gut, that their recollections of certain events might not be actually what happened. Kind of like John Mack and Bud Hopkins, actually would delve into these screen memories. And I think once we peel back the veneer, once we pull the peel off the orange and we look down into the juicy center of it, I think it's going to get even stranger.
A bit like your disorientation when you thought you were in a different part of the forest after you crossed the river. Yeah, it's fascinating. And I just want to say, next few weeks, we will probably have something to say on the 1.6 gigahertz. I've been looking into it.
Yeah.
And we've got something happening up in our area that's it's exactly that. Let's put
Imagine that.
And it's not Paul that's been doing these tests. It's people with a proper scientific background that have been doing it. So interesting, So yeah, let's carry on, Les. More questions.
Yeah, Jack Todd is asking one for you, Paul, actually.
Okay.
Did Paul witness, has Paul ever witnessed a Bigfoot?
No, I had a strange I haven't, no. And I think I've no shame in saying, people will have heard me say it many times, the cryptid phenomena was something I never thought I'd get into. But once you start receiving these reports from a vast different section of society, all singing from same hymn sheet, you realise there's something to it. And now when we've done Wolflands and these excellent witnesses, well, I'm going to jump off the fence and say I absolutely throw my full support to what they've told us. I know that weren't the question, but have I seen a Bigfoot? No. I had a weird experience when I was researching the Flixton werewolf, which is one of the oldest accounts of a werewolf anywhere in the world. I went and looked at the deeds to the Spittal Inn, which is built on the foundations of Carman's Spittal, the refuge that was built 1,084 years ago, 937 AD. And this lady kindly had the deeds in her safe, who owned the Spittal Inn, and her husband. But I only spoke to the lady, and it was a lovely sunny afternoon. We sat in the garden of this property, and we got the deeds out and everything. And she said, and I'm looking at this cryptid, the Flixton werewolf, what people have been reporting. I've got reports that go back to 1930s to present day, and then reports from other people that go way, way deeper into time. And the folklore, Trey, which you've touched upon, which you realise is an integral part of what we're looking at, because regardless of what people want to say, and we'll get to the Bigfoot in a moment, regardless of a story evolving over time, there are seeds, there are elements of truth. These stories aren't there for nothing. The phantom hounds with huge glowing eyes are all up and down this coast where we're having these reports. And I'm sure you've come across this folklore in and around your areas of research. So this lady said to me, I think there's a Bigfoot in Flixton and Stakston Wold. It's a small area. I don't think it could support it. But if we subscribe to what you've been saying, Trey, earlier, that this thing can come in and out of our reality, then it can be there. So I found myself up there one day with my little dog. It's not a windy day, nice calm day, just before dinner time, and I'm in an area. It had actually said trespassers will be prosecuted, but I'd entered the wood further down, so I'd missed that sign, strangely. And but I were only armed with a camera, and there were nothing in there to hurt. So I weren't doing anything wrong. I'm not breaking trees or breaking into anything. So as I'm walking through these trees, the side of me, they're only, I don't know, 6 to 9 inch round. They're not huge trees. but there's 3 large knocks on the side of the tree, but again me. And I look up, first thing I do is look up into the tree to see if there's any branches banging together, but there's no wind. So I immediately think, right, I know people say, well, if you take electronic equipment, you're never going to capture it. If you take cameras, you're not going to, but I still take it. I do, because otherwise it's just anecdotal. And I do want to capture something so I can do more than just tell these accounts. So I sit down on a fallen tree, pour myself a coffee, run a digital recorder, and just set a GoPro running just behind me and that kind of thing. And me and this little dog, we sit there 45 minutes, nothing. A few months later, and it could have just been some freak knock that we've heard on trees. I can't say it's a Bigfoot, but I'm just relaying. A few months later, I go in there with my eldest granddaughter, same area, and we come across the most rancid smell of rotten eggs. Absolutely vile. The same place. And there's no reason for it to be there. And I don't mean you could just step it 3 foot to one side and it's gone. It's in the area. So, but we decide it's horrible and we're not staying, and we leave. We come back an hour later, there's nothing. It's gone. So in answer to your question, no, I've not seen a Bigfoot. We've seen an unusual animal on the cliff tops, but I don't know what it was. And I've had that strange experience with the knocking and the rancid smell. And we could throw that to Trey. Have you seen one?
I've never actually put my eyeballs on one, actually seen one, but kind of what you've alluded to is, we've heard, wood knocks. We've had things, like I said, thrown into the creek adjacent to us. And it was kind of funny. I was nodding when you mentioned the sulfury, rancid
rotten
smell.
Egg, sulfur smell, yeah.
Yeah, we were researching another area, not the meadow, in another state, and we had seen shadow figures running across this fire break that's cut through the forest. And when we got to the area where we saw this figure, it was almost like a septic smell, like you had a septic line explode and spew its contents on the earth. It was just that rancid, sulfury excrement smell, very, very just foul. And there was no sewer line anywhere nearby. There were no septic systems, nothing like that would explain the smell. So yeah, I can definitely relate to everything you're saying. And we have we had a photograph that was taken while I was briefing the team during one of our first outings. And in the background, there is something that appears to be cryptid in nature. And we didn't discover this until reviewing the photographs a year later. So
yeah. Well,
there you go.
Just briefly, I won't dwell on this, but I don't think we've even got time to touch on a concentrated area within the area of eye strangeness that you're working on. But Bob Brown took an unusual picture whilst with me, and he was taking a picture of a kestrel hovering. But whilst taking it, this thing appeared on the hill about 80 yards away. We don't have any large predators. I mean, and there's no cattle. It's all, we're on cliff tops with 300 to 400 foot cliffs, and it just looks like a huge thing sort of down on the ground looking over. He took one picture and he managed to get this one picture. Thought, what's that? And bang, he'd gone. He'd got it, but it weren't there again. So yeah, strange. But I think we need to concentrate on some questions, getting them out there for Trey, if possible, Les, please.
Yeah, she she didn't leave her address with us, obviously, but from what we could tell, she was from, I would say, in a radius of 40 miles, 50 miles, from this area. Her demeanor, and of course, we didn't, knock her feet out from under her, sit on her, and do a blood alcohol, but that's an excellent question, because I have several medical folks on my staff, and they said that she presented as though she was under the influence of something, but she acted so strange and so bizarre. One of my paramedics on the team said he's been doing this for 30 plus years, and he has never in his career seen someone act as strange and as bizarre as this woman. That's one of the reasons that I, have no interest in putting her name out there, because a person could read this account and say, well, she was under the influence of drugs or alcohol, which would call into question her licensure from the state in which she practices whatever her profession is. So, it was akin to somebody being under the influence. It put off that kind of vibe, but even more so, if that makes any sense.
Well, it's left a profound effect on you, hasn't it? So definitely different. Definitely different. Yes. Okay, Les.
Yeah, thanks for that. And it appears that my mic was off when I read that out onto the stream, so we'll go backwards way on. Trey's answered the question, but the question was the lady who turned up when they was doing the research, was she under the influence of drink, drugs, etc.?
No.
Thanks, Les.
Okay, so let's have a look then. The disabled Welshman. Trey, do you think the Patterson Gimlin Bigfoot film is legit?
Yeah, my personal opinion, I think it is. There's been a whole lot of, research and analysis done on it. Here in the States, M.K. Davis has done a lot of stabilization. And to me, and I am not an expert in physiology, and all I have is a minor in anthropology, so I'm not an expert on anthropology, but the way the creature moves in a very fluid and natural way, and there are people much more, educated than me on this. They agree. The technology for special effects back when that film was made was not at the stage where they could make a very realistic and lifelike suit. I don't think it looks like a person in a monkey suit. So I think that it is legitimate. I think they did capture a North American unknown hominid in that film. There are rumors that there is more film that was taken about that time period that involved more than one Sasquatch. So that's my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think, Trey, if we jump back, you've got some people who sort of will say, well, if you're taking electronic digital cameras out with you, you're not going to get this footage. You're not going to capture these things. What that was filmed on was none of the sort of modern technology, modern tech that's giving out signals and infrared that we've got today. Do you think that's the reason, assuming that this is the legit footage, do you think that's the reason that they caught it? Because there's been nothing filmed as good since.
Yeah, it could be. If I recall correctly, the camera that was used was a clock spring, camera. I think it was 16 millimeter. That you literally wind up, and when you pull the trigger, the spring work starts unwinding and powers the device to advance the film in the shutter. And it puts off no signature, no electromagnetic signature, no other than the clicking of the device. It's not loud, and it's very unobtrusive. And some people even prefer that technology because it is so bomb-proof. Which is interesting. There's a really neat movie called Nope, where they use that technology for that very reason, that it's immune to some of these other effects. And kind of shifting gears a whole lot is electronics will fail in these areas.
That was going to be one of my questions to you. So have you had that happen?
Well, absolutely. Even as recently as October, they're so prevalent that I wear a wind-up Omega Speedmaster watch, which is totally analog with a mechanical winding, because we've had watches and cell phones completely go haywire, in this area. But going back to what you were talking about is electronics. As recently as October, this is really weird. And what's really cool about it is we had so many witnesses. Is we had the film team, documentarian team out there with us in October, and they had the professional digital video cameras with them. Very high-end, very expensive equipment. This gentleman was a professional cinematographer. And we went out to the meadow, and there was an area maybe 10 meters by 10 meters. that if you were outside of this area, the indicator in his viewfinder would show that his batteries were about 80%. He would step into this area, it would drop down to 10%. He would step out of the area, it'd go up to 80. He'd step back into the area and drop down to 10. And it was very tightly confined, geographically. And it kind of got to be a joke. It's like, okay, I got 80%, now 10, now 80, now 10. And you could almost draw a line where if you cross this line, it would drop down to 10%. So, yeah, we've had all kinds of electrical problems with our equipment.
Briefly, Peter, who's doing the electronic testing with us at Bempton and Speeton, and somebody 400 miles away, where we've had this, what we're going to talk about in a few weeks, the 1.6. We took a laptop up and equipment to measure this. Good laptop, good battery, 100% charge. I probably got this wrong, and if Pete's listening, he's probably saying, well, it weren't 25%, but something tells me within minutes it dropped to 30%, and he couldn't understand it. Now, we didn't do what you guys did, and we didn't go and move, I don't know, 10 feet, and then it went up again. But when we finished, because what we were doing, we went to Speeton, which is about 2 miles away. We're back up to like 95%.
Yep.
So I can. Yeah, there's comparisons again, similarities.
Yeah,
Have we
absolutely.
Squeeze a few more questions in, Les? And we need to know, or that our listeners need to know, where they can obtain Trey's books, his information. Do you have a website?
I do not have a website. Usually you can find me passed out behind the local pub or liquor store. No, I'm kidding.
That sounds like
actually, you can go to Facebook, and if you type in Trey Hudson -author, that's my public page. Please jump on there and ask a question or whatever. The book, we have it in audiobook, hardcover, softcover, and ebook. Go to Amazon, just type in my name, Trey Hudson, or the Meadow Project Explorations into the South Skinwalker Ranch. And I am happy to say that we look like we're going to have it published very soon in French. So if anybody parlez-vous français, it will be published hopefully here very soon in the French language.
Thank you.
So, please, I think the ebook is a heck of a value. I think it's $6 US. So, it's a pretty good value. So if anybody would love to buy it, I sure would appreciate it.
Well, that's great. And you see that that's what I like about people like Trey. Sorry, Les, I know you've got going to come in with something, but I had to ask him that. You get some guests, and I'm not labeling anybody, but we're just talking about our books and where you can obtain this, where you can obtain that. Trey's about putting the information out. Fabulous, thank you. Les, hit us with another question.
Yeah, well, I've got to concur with everything you said there, Trey. In fact, on Amazon, where the ebook is, if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can get your ebook for free.
Oh, cool. Even better.
Because I'm in the middle of reading it now, Trey.
Well, thank you.
And, okay, so I've got to apologise to Lee. Roscoe did ask a very, very early question. And there's a bit of a crossover of questions tonight, but it's still complicated to explain. And Lee was just asking, do these creatures go through a portal? I know we discussed it earlier, Trey.
Yeah.
So maybe a quick one on that one.
Yeah, possibly. Possibly there's some sort of mechanism. I think that they're able to wink in and out of existence. We had a box-shaped anomaly that we sent a team into the remnants of it, and they disappeared off our thermal. We have this on film. We have not been able to replicate that again. So yeah, I think there are portals or gateways or whatever you want to call it out there, and it would make sense that these creatures or whatever entities are using it.
Thank you.
And I'm going to come in with a final question of the night, and I apologise for anybody who haven't asked their question, but it comes from Patricia Adams Rice, and she's asking, what is the ultimate goal of the Meadow Project?
Oh, that is an excellent question, Patricia.
Brilliant question.
Is if you start setting expectations, you drive yourself toward that outcome. So I try not to set up any end state or expectations. Is we take the experiences as they come. If there was an ultimate goal, is to get the experiences out to the public, be it through interviews, be it through written stuff. Unfortunately, some of the videos and stuff I can't release right now because I'm under contract to possibly get them out in a much larger audience through another means. But like I said, the experiences aren't mine. They're not the teams. They belong to the world. And, like Fox Mulder said, the truth is out there. And I just keep putting it out there for anybody that's interested.
Thank you.
Okay, on that note, I think we are practically reaching the end of the show. I've got to say, fantastic guest, Trey. Thank you for joining us. And I'm speaking on behalf of Paul when I ask this. Would you join us on another show in the future at any time?
Yeah, absolutely. The cool thing is,
yeah.
I will be retired in April, so my schedule will be pretty open. So yeah, absolutely.
Trey, we'll have you on daily then if you're retiring in April.
Trey, thank you. It's been a pleasure and easy.
Thank you.
Thank
you, gentlemen.
Easy,
okay.
Easy guy to talk to. Great information. Thank you very much. So
okay, thank you very much. Okay. Good night. Okay, right, a great show with Paul and Trey Hudson tonight. Thanks all for joining. I apologise if you did encounter a little bit of sound issues from Trey, but I'm sure YouTube did a great job on the compression, as they always do, and probably that's why we're getting a little bit lack of quality there. But never mind that. Great show, as I say. Trey suggested he may come on again to talk to us further, and we'll get more questions in from you all. I've got to thank everybody for joining us on the chat tonight, everybody from the UK and around the world, and we'll see you next time.